All right, let's jump right in. Every single cyber attack you've ever read about, the big ones, the small ones, they don't start with a big explosion of code. Nope. They start quietly. They start with a whisper. It all begins with just watching, with gathering information, long before a single malicious thing is ever done.
And this, right here, is where it gets wild. Because the most powerful tool in this first phase, it's not some secret, complex piece of software. It's something you and I use literally every day. The most effective hacks, they often kick off with nothing more than a simple Google search.
Now this whole first phase, it has a name. It's called OSINT, which is short for Open Source Intelligence. The best way to think about it is like being a detective. You're not breaking any laws here. You're not kicking down digital doors. You are simply gathering up clues that are already out there, in public, and piecing together a puzzle that's just been left in plain sight.
So what kind of puzzle pieces are we even talking about? Well, an attacker is hunting for things like a company's domain names, the IP address ranges they own, public email addresses of their employees, and this one is huge, their tech stacks. Knowing the tech stack, that's like a burglar knowing the exact brand of locks you use on all your doors. It tells them which keys to try first. Every little piece adds another detail to the picture of the target.
And this is absolutely the key takeaway here. This isn't hacking like you see in the movies. Not yet. This is about changing your perspective. It's about learning to see the digital world a little differently, to spot the information that companies are just accidentally leaking every single day. Most data breaches happen because the front door was already unlocked and nobody noticed.
So all this OSINT stuff, it's what we call passive reconnaissance. It's like watching a building from across the street with binoculars. You learn a lot, but you're not interacting. But eventually, you might want to get a little closer. And that's when we shift from passive recon to active recon. Instead of just watching, we're going to walk right up to the building and, start knocking on some doors.
And the best tool for knocking on those digital doors? It's a legendary piece of software called Nmap. It's probably one of the most famous and powerful networking tools ever made. And it's going to be our first step into actively, but carefully, poking around a target.
So what does Nmap actually do? Well, to put it simply, it sends out little signals to a target computer, and it just listens for what comes back. It's basically checking every single digital door, which in the tech world we call a port, to see if it's open, if it's closed, or maybe if there's a firewall in the way. And even more importantly, it tries to figure out exactly what software is running behind each of those open doors. And believe it or not, this is something you can do yourself, totally safely, totally legally. It's actually a really simple 4-step process. First, and I can't stress this enough, this is the most important part. You need a target that you have explicit permission to scan. Then you just pop open a terminal, type a simple command, and learn how to read what it spits out.
And get this, the folks who made Nmap actually set up a special server just for people to practice on. It's scanme.nmap.org. That's your safe, legal practice dummy. The command is right there, nmap-sv scanme.nmap.org. That little -sv part is what tells Nmap to try and figure out the version of the services it finds, which is super useful. Let me say it one more time because it's that important. Never, ever run Nmap on a target you don't have clear, written permission to scan. Seriously.
So go ahead, give it a try. Run that exact command. What does it find? You're going to see a list of open ports and the services running on them. Maybe it's a web server, maybe an email service. Who knows? This is the exact kind of information an attacker uses to figure out their next move. So what did you find?
And that information leads us perfectly into our next topic. Because once you've found all the open doors, the next logical step is to start looking for the weak spots. You start looking for the cracks in the wall. So in our next explainer, we're going to dive into exactly what you do with this info, how you find and understand vulnerabilities.
Before a single line of malicious code is ever written, before any firewall gets breached, the most important part of a hack has already happened. And you know what? It has nothing to do with typing. It's all about seeing. Today, we're going to break down that first crucial step, the art of reconnaissance.
I know, right? It sounds way too simple to be true. But this quote, it really gets to the heart of what modern hacking is all about. It's not some scene from a movie with frantic typing in a dark room. No, the most powerful attacks are built on a foundation of simple, patient observation.
So, where does this observation even begin? Well, it starts with something called OSINT. This is the very first phase, and the whole idea is to look from a distance without ever making contact with your target.
OSINT stands for Open Source Intelligence. Now, the key word here, the one you really got to focus on, is open. This is all about gathering information that is already out there for the public to see. We're talking about data that companies and people have willingly, or more often accidentally, put out into the world. And because it's public, it is completely legal to collect. It's not hacking, it's just being a really, really good observer.
And this really sums up the whole mindset. You aren't trying to break down a door. Think of it more like you're just walking around a building and checking to see which windows and doors have been left wide open. The whole goal is to build a detailed map of your target using only the information that's already leaking out.
So what kind of treasure can you actually find with OSINT? Well, think about it. You can find things like a company's IP address ranges. That's basically their digital real estate. You might uncover public employee emails, which is a perfect list for a targeted phishing attack down the line. But here's the real gold mine. You can often figure out the exact technology a company uses. If you find out they're running an old, vulnerable version of some server software, you already know which key you're going to use before you even get to the door.
And here's the most critical takeaway from all this. This isn't just some abstract theory. Most data breaches don't happen because of some super genius, impossible-to-stop attack. Nope, they happen because of this. Simple, basic information was left completely exposed, giving attackers everything they needed to just walk right in.
Now, everything we've talked about so far, all that OSINT stuff, is what we call passive. You leave no fingerprints, no trace at all. But what happens when a hacker wants to go from just looking to actually, touching? Well, that brings us to the second phase, where observation turns into direct interaction.
This next stage is called active reconnaissance. So if OSINT was looking at the building from across the street with binoculars, active recon is walking right up to it and starting to jiggle the doorknobs and check the windows to see what's unlocked.
And the main tool for knocking on those digital doors is a little thing called Nmap. Think of it like a digital probe. It sends out a series of tiny signals to a server, and it's basically asking, hey, you there? Which of your doors are open, and what exactly is running behind them?
And you know what? Running a basic scan is surprisingly simple. You just type a command like nmap-sv and then the target's IP address. Now that little -sv flag, that's where the magic is. It doesn't just ask if a door is open. It asks for the exact version of the software running on the other side. So if a scan comes back saying, hey, this server is running web server version 1.2, an attacker can immediately look up if that version has any known vulnerabilities. And just like that, they have a blueprint for an attack.
Okay, let's stop for a second, because we need to be absolutely 100% crystal clear on this point. The moment you use a tool like Nmap on a system you do not own, you have crossed a major line. You've gone from legal observation to potentially illegal activity. It is the digital version of walking down a street and trying the doorknob of every single house. So never scan a system unless you own it or you have explicit written permission to test it. Period. So when you understand how these tools work, you get a totally new way of seeing the digital world, not just as a user, but more like an architect. You can see the open doors, the potential cracks in the foundation. But that knowledge, it comes with a pretty serious responsibility to understand the ethical lines that you just cannot cross.
All right, so let's put it all together. The whole process starts passively, right? With OSINT, gathering public data from a safe distance. Then it can become active, with tools like Nmap that directly poke and prod a system. And that jump from looking to touching, that's the critical ethical and legal line in the sand.
And that leaves us with one last thought. Everything we've talked about doesn't just apply to giant corporations, it applies to you. We all have a digital footprint, a huge collection of public information that tells a story about us. So the real question you have to ask yourself is, what story is yours telling and who out there might be reading it?